Hello and welcome to the Say Yes Movement podcast with Heather and John, where we help you with your professional and personal growth, helping you say yes to all the scary stuff. Hey Heather, how's it going?
It,
How are you doing today?
I am doing amazing, John. It is Celebration Friday. It has been one hell of an amazing week for all of us. Tell me what you're celebrating. And for those that are listening, we want to also hear what you're celebrating this week. What's the impact you made? Who impacted you? And what
Mm.
is the lessons learned in your life? And we love to celebrate with all of you together. But John, what are you celebrating this week?
Yeah, no, listen, I'm celebrating the stranger that I had a conversation with this week on the subway because one of the things I get to do 3 times a week is, take the transit down. And, it's funny because most of the times I'm on the subway, people have their heads down, they're looking at their phones, and they're totally disconnected from their surroundings and the people around you. But it just happened that I sat next to somebody and they were in a good mood. I was in a good mood. And it's like, hey, these delays are fun, right? Like we just kind of start, and he's like, "What do you mean these delays are fun?" And that kind of led into just a much bigger conversation. And what's really neat is when you open yourself up to just being and just being in the moment, being
Mm.
present, being there, and just not having any sort of agendas. Because I know some people get really weary about talking to others on the train and shouldn't I, is, what's this person want from me? There's always that, right? And having this conversation with this person was just like, hey, you're a human, I'm a human, let's just have a chat, right? So it was a lot of fun, just making a new friend on the TTC. So good stuff. What about yourself, Heather? What are you celebrating this week?
I am celebrating a commitment to dedicating time for my own uplifting
Mm.
and learning and putting myself in an environment that challenges the way that I'm thinking. And John, we got to go to an amazing event here in Toronto called Archangel, and it was absolutely fantastic from a just a whole entire day dedicated to reframing our mind, reframing our heart, and thinking bigger than we are sometimes
Mm.
give ourselves permission for. So that is what I'm celebrating this week. Now, where that's going to go is the exciting adventure of the future. But right now, I'm celebrating the community that comes together to really focus on making the world a better place.
Yeah. No, listen, I love Giovanni's the organizer of the events, and I love what he does with these events because he really does take them to the next level, right? We talk about, you know, uh, continuous improvement, right? Continuous
Yeah.
improvement in terms of taking things to the next level. And over the years, I've had the opportunity to go to several of these Archangel events, and every year they get better. Every year he's
Yes.
taking it to the next level. He's opening us up. And the one thing I love, there's two things that happen, and I'll be completely honest. I love the fact that, I'm in a room full of dreamers that want to make the world a much better place, right? And it's not very often that you actually step into a room full of strangers who want to make the world a better place. But at the same time, the one thing I'm always thinking is, what could I be doing, right? What else could I be
Mm.
contributing to? And Heather, you and I, we attended the event together years ago, and we, by chance, we just sat in the same section. We were next to each other the whole time. And I think about where we were back then and where we are right now is a very different place.
Yeah,
So much so that we're, creating impact through this podcast, right? Like creating impact, and we get notes all the time from people, and we love that. So thank you. Continue to send them. They light us up. But there's no way in hell that we would be where we are right now if it wasn't for being exposed to these people that dream a lot bigger than what's just in front of them at the moment. And I love being in the room with people whose thinking is so big and so crazy and so huge that it makes you question, what can I do next? What about you, Heather? What did you take away?
I think I think you're right. When you think the goal of impacting a million people, when we made it, scared the bejeebus out of us. We were like, "That's who are we to say that we want to impact a million people?" But with the power of TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all the places that you can see YouTube, that you can see this podcast, see this recording. This goal is becoming maybe even too small for our future selves, John. And that's a scary statement because we're not at that million mark yet. But I actually think we have to be thinking even bigger, because when we started this journey of a podcast, we went with the goal of, first, let's impact ourselves. Let's share this message. And the second impact was, okay, how big do we want this to be? And 1 million people impact is the number that we came up with, because it just sounds great. It's a perfect number. But there are other people in this world that are even looking beyond that. They want it to be even bigger. So when I think of my past self that sat at one of those first conferences, both of us have been to Tony Robbins' conference. We get engaged. We do the dances. But that is a moment and a gift. I consider it a gift to myself, and also a non-negotiable, because life gets busy. And if we don't carve out time where we can actually dream big and think, what are the decisions and choices that got me to this moment in my life? And what choices and decisions do I need to make differently to get to the next point in my life? And that choice of and believing that you have a choice is this moment right now for me too. What is the choices and decisions that I need to make to be even bigger? And John, me and you have been talking about, taking the podcast episodes, the ones that really, really resonate with people, writing a book. And after Archangel, it in my mind, it's already done. It's done. We're going to get this done, John. We're going to be able to even impact more. So that's sort of what's coming up for me. Lots of lessons learned. We'll be able to talk about lots of them in the podcast, talk about all the speakers. But right now, in this moment, that's what's coming up for me.
Yeah. And listen, and, every time I attend these things, right? And just being surrounded in the energy of being in a community where there's people like me, right? Like, sometimes I feel like a stranger when I share these ideas with people. And I usually get that look on people's faces when they say, well, I want to impact 1 million people, through my podcast. And people are like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, why not? Like it just rolls off the tongue because I've said it so often. I have the belief, it's there, right? And then I share, the word of the year for me is belief, right? And they're like, that's interesting. I'm like, what's your word for the year? And they're like, I never thought of that. And I love being exposed to people where they're like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I love that word. I'm going to incorporate that into my day, or I'm going to start incorporating that into the things that I do. It just, community is so important, right?
Yes.
And having people that think a little bit like you, but different from you, at the same time, where they're big dreamers and they're just kind of thinking of the big things. It opens you up, right? I forget who said it, but you are the sum of the five that you hang out with the most. Well, imagine being in a room with thousands of people that are just like you, or think like you, not necessarily like you, but think like you, where they're all thinking big and they're all thinking about, how do I make what I do day to day impact people positively?
Yes.
And it's just so refreshing. The conversations are so different. And, I had the opportunity to have several conversations with different people, asking them what they did, what kind of impact they're creating. And people are like, yeah, I do this. And, there was one of the speakers, I don't know if it was this year or one of the other years, but they created a kit for testing for cancer. And, they did it so it could be economically affordable for people who just wanted to find out so they can get treatment, and just doing all these things. And, the innovations, the ideas, and how they come to these innovations start in these rooms. Because sometimes you meet a person that just kind of takes you to that next step, takes you to the next level. And it's like, wow, yeah, we can do that. Let's do that. Okay, good. So, you form new relationships. It's beautiful. It's just so powerful. And, it's almost like I want it every day, right?
Yes,
it's like, let's
absolutely.
just keep going, right?
That energy every day. But, you said something that I think is a really, really good distinction, is when you share your goals and your dreams, do people sort of back away from you like, oh, that's great that you have that? Or do you get the reaction, oh, I want to do that too. Oh, you just inspired me to do something. And often the gift of those words, you just inspired me to think differently today.
Mm.
If you said that to someone in your life, if you said that to someone, what would you actually be giving to them? And that is an energy shift and an ability to level up to be on the same frequency as someone else that might be doing something that feels bigger than you're capable of.
Yeah.
Just be inspired by those words. And so that distinction of an action that's different, as opposed to recoiling away and thinking, oh, you, John, that's all for you. What if you just said, wow, if I just took on the power of belief like John has, what if I had a goal that felt bigger than myself?
Mm.
What would that actually do to my life? And just that reframe in the brain is enough for your brain to go, I'm going to go after that. I don't know how yet. You don't need to know the how. Me and you both say you don't need to know the how, but you do need to take some sort of action
Yeah.
towards that future vision. And
Yeah.
how
And
is that?
yeah, you know, what's really cool, you know, being at these events and kind of going through them year after year, you get to meet and connect with people. And, you know, one of the things that I love is, you know, I've seen people who actually spoken on my Fearless Voices stage years ago now speak on the Archangel stage. And it's like, oh my gosh, you went from a room of like 100 to a room of thousands of people. And it just, you get to see how having the vision, you know, creating that bigger goal, that bigger life for yourself, people start actually following through. And it's,
Mm,
wow, you've done it. Like one of the people I got to meet this past weekend was Jose. And Jose's got a stutter. And if you're not familiar with Jose, you should go check him out. It's Jose Perenian. He was on Canada's Got Talent, the TV show, right? And I remember him like speaking, you know, for the first time at a Fearless event, and it's like, and he was sharing his story, and he just kept going. He's like, I'm not going to let this stutter stop me. And he kept going,
mm,
kept going, kept going. You know, he's now a keynote speaker. He speaks around the world at different organizations. He's, you know, he spoke a few years back on the Archangel stage. He spoke recently. He did a skit because he's also doing stand-up comedy, and he got to do Canada's Got Talent, and they loved him. Howie Mandel was just, you know, I don't know if he actually did pee his pants, but he was laughing so hard it looked like he was peeing his pants. And just to see the growth and the progression of people throughout the years is, man, it's mind blowing. And mind blowing to see, you know, it's like this is these, you know, these are my people, right?
yes.
This is the
Well,
group that I'm in, right?
and think about the concept of that. So here's a person that has a stutter and he's made a career out of public speaking. Like the two could be no, there's in most people's minds, they're so far apart, but he reframed his story, his life story to say, you know what, I can't change that I have a stutter, but I can change what I do with it. And he chose to be an inspiration for all of those out there that had not just a stutter, but are disbelieving that what they think is possible to be the best version of themselves. He said yes to putting himself in moments that are scary and uncomfortable. And also, he's going to be possibly ridiculed or laughed at. And so he got past all of those fears and said, you know what? It's worth the price of admission if I'm going to feel powerful every single time that I do it. And isn't that a life lesson for all of us? What is that one thing that scares us that we're avoiding, that if we just took that action to do, wouldn't we be an inspiration for one other person?
Yeah. And, you know, and what's showing up for me as you're saying that is, you know, sometimes what we feel is the weakness or, you know, the
Mm,
disability that's holding us back could actually be the superpower if you step into it. You know,
wow.
and I've seen that all, you know, I've seen that several times. There's a good friend speaker of mine, Tracy, Unstoppable Tracy. That's it. I was just trying to
Mm,
think of her name. And you know, she just competed in a sailing competition recently. You know, and so if you don't know Unstoppable Tracy, you should definitely look her up. She's a beautiful person, so much personality, so much life, and she's missing her limbs, right? And she's created a whole life for herself. You know, where the average person with all their abilities and everything, and you know, she's like, nothing can stop me. Anything's possible. She's a skier and she's a sailor and she's an athlete, a competitor, and a speaker, and it just blows me away every time. Like every time I see her, she just gives me the biggest hugs, and you know, it just lights me up. And you know, knowing people like that, knowing people that are just going beyond the physical boundaries that they have, the disabilities, and how they've converted, how they've transformed their disabilities into their superpower, every single time just blows me away. And I'm just like, wow, yeah,
Yeah.
I can go do that. And like, if, not to say if they can do it, I can do it, partly, yes. If they can do it, I can do it too. And that being inspired by them and their actions and their belief that nothing's impossible.
Nothing's impossible. And,
Nothing's impossible.
I think that the lesson here, and you can just Google Unstoppable Tracy. She's going to pop up in your feed really quickly. But the lesson here is she actually uses that as her name now. So everything around her is unstoppable. So that is a huge lesson in how do you ingrain a belief system, a new belief system, because guaranteed she did not have that belief system throughout her whole life. She had to curate that. She had to manifest it. She had to sit in it, and she had to believe it herself. And now people tell her she's unstoppable all the time because that's her name. That's the brand that she uses. So think about, what would you want to be known for? What would you say yes to for your future self? And are you using language that honors that belief system, or are you using disempowering language? And this is all about our internal dialogue and also the things that we say. As I get older, I hear people around me say, oh, you know what, my back hurts, it's it's old age, it's this and that, and they're actually defining themselves as old. So as simple as those kinds of little tiny moments can define for how we're going to feel in the future, because you're actually accepting that that's your belief system. So the power of words that then influence belief is unbelievably incredible as an action.
Yeah, no, it's so, and the other thing, just to kind of add on to what you just said, Heather, who do you need to be around to elevate your thinking? Who do you need to be around that's going to take you to that next level? Who do you need to be around to create those new beliefs? And how can you support it with evidence, right? Because, part of the transformation in a belief is we're looking for evidence of it being true. And here's the thing, we're always going to find it, right? We're always going to find. So if the belief is I'm getting old, I don't necessarily have the functions and the abilities that I used to have. And, if you're only 50, you're only getting started. So let me just I'm letting the cat out of the bag. So everybody should know that. You're only getting started, and you're only halfway, because now people are living to, well into their hundreds, and technology is going to make that even better. But, how can you get into rooms where people have beliefs that are not necessarily, that are contrarian to yours, but are true? And what I love about, Giovanni's events, his Archangels events specifically, is I'm stepping into rooms of people that are supporting this new belief, this new way of being, this new way of attracting things into their life, this new way of making impact. And the one thing I'm always listening out for is, how can I make more impact based on what I'm learning, based on what others are doing around me? And how can I incorporate that into some of the work that we're doing? And it's just so amazing to find evidence of all of that being true. Because having a belief is one thing, but when it's true because you see it in others, it supports the belief, it ingrains it, it makes it stronger. It helps with the transformation of the belief, right?
I love this concept of find the evidence to make it true, because like you said, our brain's always going to do that. And John, I think that's our perfect call to action as people go into this weekend. So as we've been speaking, there's some words that we use: belief, unstoppable, powerful, impact. But there's other words that you can choose from. So I want you to write down a word, and then for the next 24 hours, go look for evidence of that word showing up in your life. Or you want to feel unstoppable? Do you want to feel accomplished? Do you want to be an athlete? Whatever that word is, find the evidence, and your brain is going to find it for you in multiple places. And it will also mean that you're going to activate a higher frequency for yourself, and maybe even meet some people that are looking and at that that frequency. And that's why we love going to these events, John, because we get to step into a different level of frequency and try things on, try on different people's beliefs and their stories. And wow, I want to do that too. So that is your call to action for today and this weekend.
Yeah, excellent. It's a beautiful call to action. And if you need some help on where to go and what rooms to get into, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I have a ton of recommendations where you can go and be around people that are just, outstanding and just beautiful. All right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the Say Yes Movement podcast. Just remember, when you shift your mindset, you shift your life. Wishing you all a great one. Talk to y'all soon.